So here's the big question, the one you see everywhere. Can fasting actually make you live longer? I mean, could the secret to a longer, healthier life really be hidden in, well, not eating? It's a pretty wild idea. So today, we're going to dig into the real science and see what's actually going on. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're putting intermittent fasting right under the microscope. Our mission? To separate the genuine science from all the wellness hype, especially when it comes to slowing down aging. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the promise that got everyone so excited in the first place. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how it's supposed to work, in theory. After that comes the most important part, the human reality check. Then we'll zero in on the absolute strongest evidence we have right now. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with what this actually means for you. Okay, let's dive into section 1, the anti-aging promise. To really get why fasting is such a huge topic, you've got to go back to where it all began, in the lab. And here's the thing that kicked this whole movement off. In lab animals, the evidence is just undeniable. We're talking everything from tiny yeast cells to mice. When they fast, they consistently live longer and healthier lives. This is the bedrock, the foundation of the entire fasting for longevity idea. And we're not just talking about a few extra days. The effects are seriously profound. It's not just about lifespan, but health span, more years of being healthy and active. Fasting seems to flip on these ancient survival switches in the body, things like mTOR and AMPK, and it kicks off this amazing cellular recycling process called autophagy. Okay, so that's what happens in the lab. Pretty impressive, right? But what's actually going on under the hood? Let's move on and look at the theoretical blueprint for how fasting is supposed to extend our lives. Now, before we even talk about fasting, we have to understand the OG, the original gold standard in longevity research, calorie restriction, or CR. For decades, the most surefire way to make lab animals live longer was just to feed them about 10 to 25% fewer calories every day, without making them malnourished, of course. And then you've got intermittent fasting, or IF. This is where timing enters the picture. The whole idea here is about when you eat, not necessarily how much you eat. And that right there is a super important distinction that we're going to keep coming back to. And you've probably heard, intermittent fasting isn't just one single plan. It's really an umbrella term. You've got time-restricted eating, like the popular 16-8 method. There's the 5-2 diet, where you have a couple of really low-calorie days each week. Some people do alternate day fasting. And then there are these specialized plans, like the fasting-mimicking diet. So how does fasting actually flip these longevity switches in our cells? Well, you can think of it as a pretty simple chain reaction. The moment you stop eating, those signals that are always telling your cells to grow, things like IGF-1 and mTOR, they start to quiet down. And that dip gives the green light to these pro-longevity pathways, like AMPK, to turn on and start doing their protective work. This brings us to one of the coolest benefits of fasting, a process called autophagy. The best way to think about it is like your body's internal cleanup crew. When there's no food coming in, your cells use that downtime to go around, find old, junked-up parts, and recycle them. It's absolutely critical for keeping things running smoothly. Okay, I know. That all sounds absolutely amazing in theory. The animal studies are compelling, the biology makes sense. But, and this is the big but, does any of this actually work when we move out of the lab and into the messy reality of human beings? Let's find out. And this right here is where the story gets a whole lot more complicated. Remember that difference between IF, when you eat, and CR, how much you eat? Well, it turns out to be absolutely critical. Because when you look at the human studies, the evidence that just changing your eating time slows aging, well, it's pretty mixed. The strongest evidence we have actually points right back to good old calorie restriction. This really shows that IF is no magic bullet. In fact, a big study in 2020 was a huge wake-up call for a lot of people. It found that for weight loss, the 16-8 fasting plan was no better than just eating 3 regular meals a day. And here's the really worrying part. The fasting group actually lost more lean muscle mass, which is the exact opposite of what you want for healthy aging. It also looks like it's not just that you fast, but when you fast that matters. A lot of research is now suggesting that an early eating window, say finishing dinner in the mid-afternoon, gives you way more metabolic benefits for things like weight and blood pressure compared to skipping breakfast and eating late. It just seems to work better with our body's natural daily rhythms. Now, I know you might have seen some pretty scary headlines recently trying to link fasting with heart problems, but you have to look at the details. The expert consensus is crystal clear. That was low-quality observational data. It wasn't a randomized trial, which means it's full of other factors that could explain the results. For now, we have to stick with the high-quality evidence. So, if we want to look at that high-quality human data, where do we turn? Well, that brings us to Section 4, and to what is really the gold standard study in this entire field, the CALERIE trial. And look, if you only remember one thing from this whole explainer, please let it be this. The single most compelling piece of human evidence we have for slowing down the aging process comes from this landmark study called CALERIE. And it was a test of calorie restriction, not intermittent fasting. This is our best look yet at what really moves the needle in people. So, what did this massive 2-year-long study find? Well, using these really sophisticated tools called epigenetic clocks that can measure your biological pace of aging, they found something incredible. The people who practiced just a modest calorie restriction slowed their pace of aging by about 2 to 3%. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but it's a real, statistically significant effect. It's the strongest signal we have that this is possible in humans. So, after going through all of that, what's the bottom line? Let's boil this all down into your practical takeaway. Because the best way to think about fasting is as a powerful tool, not some kind of miracle. This table right here really puts it all into perspective. On one side, you have intermittent fasting. Think of it as a behavioral tool. It can be a fantastic way to help you eat less overall, or to get your meal timing in sync with your body clock. But on the other side, you have calorie restriction. And based on what we know today, that is the proven strategy for actually slowing the pace of biological aging in humans. So let's wrap this up. Here are the 4 key things you should take away. Number 1, yes, IF can be a really useful tool to help you eat less. Number 2, for the specific goal of slowing aging, sustained, modest calorie restriction is what has the best evidence behind it. 3, if you are going to do time-restricted eating, an early eating window is probably your best bet. And number 4, and this one is non-negotiable, you absolutely have to prioritize eating enough protein and doing resistance training to protect your muscle. And finally, we have to talk about safety. This is so important. This approach is not for everyone. If you have type 1 or type 2 diabetes and you're on insulin, if you have a history of gallstones, if you are pregnant or breastfeeding, or if you have any history of disordered eating, you must talk to your doctor before trying any kind of fasting. Which really leaves us with this final thought. After sifting through all the evidence, maybe the real secret to healthy aging isn't some complex timing trick. Maybe it's something much simpler, though not necessarily easier. Just building a lifestyle where day in and day out, we consistently eat just a little bit less. What do you think?